Joining us now is Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist at the World Health Organization. Very good morning to you, Dr. Swaminathan. Obviously, we've seen a lot of mutations regarding COVID-19, but this one specifically is causing a great deal of concern in the United Kingdom and, of course, the European continent. What do we know about it?
So what we do know about this variant is that it is unusual because it has a rather large number of mutations, about 22 or so, in the spike protein region of the virus, which is, of course, important because that's the protein part of the virus that actually binds to the receptor on the human cells in the respiratory tract, and that's how it enters the respiratory tract. And it's also important because it's the target for antibody production by the human immune response, and as well as a target for a lot of the vaccines that are currently being developed. Now, this variant has been recognized over the last several weeks in the UK, and I should say that scientists from the UK are working very closely with the WHO and with the network that we have called the Virus Evolution Working Group, because we have to keep in mind that viruses evolve, and we've observed a number of mutations over the last year or so, and we expect this to continue. Now, it's really important that we study the impact of these mutations, particularly when it starts becoming a dominant strain. We've seen this happen before with other strains, where they arise and then they slowly take over and they become the dominant strain. Perhaps they have some advantage, which allows them to spread. But I think the bottom line here is really that the interventions that are needed to prevent the spread, regardless of which variant it is, are the same. And I think that's key, and that's where we should be focusing, while scientists are still doing the lab experiments to figure out what are the implications of this new variant. Does it really enhance transmissibility, as has been suggested? Does it really prevent antibodies from binding to the virus? And will it have any implications for vaccine efficacy? These are still questions that scientists are hopefully going to answer in the coming days and weeks.
How long will it take, Dr. Swaminathan, until we know this variant's response to the vaccines?
I would say that it's going to take, a couple of days, if not a week or more, because there are several experiments that need to be run. And because this is, it's such an important question, it needs to be addressed properly. And we have to let the science and the data drive us. So what needs to be done is experiments in the laboratory where this strain of virus is cultured, and then it's exposed to neutralizing antibodies from people who have either had natural infection or people who've received the vaccine in a clinical trial, perhaps, and who have antibodies that were, vaccine-induced. And so when we do those experiments, then we will know whether we can actually neutralize this strain of virus just like you neutralize any other strain of the virus. So we need to wait for those experiments to be done.
Is this new variant unique to the United Kingdom?
Well, the largest numbers of genome sequences but again, we need to keep in mind that the UK is probably sequencing much more, than many countries. And so it's not really easy to compare. Similarly, South Africa, within the African continent, there are huge disparities. South Africa does most of the genome sequencing on the continent, and therefore they are describing a variant as well that's recently seemed to have become much more prominent. So again, a lesson is more countries need to do more sequencing and deposit it in the public databases that we have now for sequences like GISAID or the GenBank and so on, so that scientists can actually compare, look across countries, and also look at the timelines of how these strains have been evolving. So yes, at the moment, most of these strains have been described from the UK, but I think we have to remember the caveats that I just mentioned, and perhaps if we look harder, we might find it in other countries as well.
And that's due to the fact that the United Kingdom, has an advanced genomic sequencing. There's also one hypothesis that this arose due to the use of convalescent serum in immunocompromised individuals. Is there any science right now pointing to that?
I don't think we could say as yet definitively how this arose. Again, viruses do mutate. Naturally, there could have been some particular incident, like the immunocompromised host, where the infection could have lasted a little bit longer than in a normal host. And so when the virus is able to replicate longer in the body, there's a tendency for more mutations to accumulate. That's one of the hypotheses that's being considered by scientists. But I think, again, we need to wait and see what were the specific conditions under which this may have arisen.
Does this hinder, though, some of these features like human convalescent serum, monoclonal antibodies, some of these that are actually under emergency use authorization right now from Lilly and Regeneron? What does it mean for those kind of responses if this hypothesis was to be true?
Yes, I think this is exactly why we need these studies to be done, because it's really important for us to keep track of the virus as it evolves, because it's so important for treatments and for prevention, for vaccines, for monoclonal antibodies, and so on. And it's very normal for a virus to behave like this, So all viruses do. It's just that there's so much of focus and interest on this virus. The influenza virus mutates much more rapidly than the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that's why every year we have to redo the strain selection for the flu vaccine for that particular year, and WHO coordinates that. So these are all possibilities in the future that we need to consider for this virus as well. But at the moment, I think there is no indication that either vaccines or treatments will not work. Viruses, as they come under pressure, as you start using drugs and vaccines, viruses evolve to try to avoid those. So that's the natural evolution. But at this point in time, I don't think we have any evidence to suggest that the vaccines under development, or for that matter, the monoclonals, will not work for the majority of people.